I'm Norm Nelson. This is my latest oil painting, palette knife on canvas, the Seven Devils up in central Idaho. I'm a visual artist. I shoot video, and I do a lot of fine art paintings, watercolors and oils, and I've been inspired by John Coleus since 1980 to keep working at the art world.
What is it about Idaho wilderness that inspires you to paint?
Whenever we go backpacking, we go by the sign that says the Frank Church Wilderness. We always salute Frank for that wilderness because it is such an honor to be in a place that's that old. And that's what inspires me. You go to a high mountain lake in the Frank Church Wilderness, that lake looks pretty much like it's looked for at least 14 million years, thereabouts. So you're in a completely natural ecosystem that has essentially been untouched because it has no impact from man other than the footprints that are around that lake. So the fact that it's so wild and so natural, when you sit down and look at it with a paintbrush and some color and some composition to work with, you're interacting with that thousands-year-old image. And eventually it just inspires you to say, okay, that's what I'm going to do, is that peak with that lake or that broken snag or whatever it might be. And it just continues to inspire me to go to new places, new places, new places, because they're all equally wild, and the wilder the better. No trail, yeah, that's what we like, no trail, you know. So to get out into that kind of country and have that kind of a wilderness experience, to live with it, sleep in it, and eat in it, and paint it is just plain exciting.
If you were to take someone from out of state on any Idaho backpacking trip, where would you take them?
You know, if people came to visit me and wanted to go out backpacking, go to some of the places that I go, I don't always take them to the most rugged places like McCall, because a lot of those areas don't have trails. And most people feel more comfortable if they have a trail. So the Sawtooth is pretty hard to beat. The only disadvantage there is you can't generally have a campfire. So if you go to a national forest, then it's legal to have a campfire, which adds a great deal of ambiance to the enjoyment of a trip. But I think Copper Basin up by Sun Valley is one of Idaho's real jewels. It's an arid high mountain landscape with small lakes, and it's a really interesting place to go. There's a number of areas in the Frank Church on the fringe where you can take people in just a couple of miles and come to a beautiful campsite, and or into a river type environment where you're camping along a stream, and you have fly fishing and all the wonderful sports that you can do out in Idaho's central mountains. Essentially is where I like to go, and where I think it's fun to take people. The thing about the Sawtooth and the White Clouds is just the inspiration of the rock formations is beyond anything other than maybe you see in Jackson Hole or Europe even. Those rock spires give people a really great feeling of what wilderness is like and what big country looks like. You know, it's got a lot of authority to it. And it's fun to paint because you have all those angles and jagged things to work with. So painting and photographing and just being in those kinds of environments is satisfying for almost any kind of person. You know, I've taken some real hardcore New Yorkers into the wilderness, and they came out better for it and a different person.
As a lifelong filmmaker, you've put a lot of Idaho images on film, and what images have been the most memorable?
In my motion picture filming career, I think, you know, I've done a lot of World Cup skiing, I've done a lot of World Cup soccer, I've done a lot of sports things that were memorable and fun, and the photographing the day in the life of the 13-year-old torchbearer for the 1992 Olympics was really a fun shoot, and a beautiful young woman running in slow motion through the Gothic streets of the Savoy in France. But I think the most memorable would be like my experience filming the endangered whooping crane. I went out at 5 o'clock in the morning and got into this blind in a field that I knew that the whooping cranes were going to land in eventually. And sat there drinking coffee all morning, nothing happened. I was bored to tears, and finally these big flights of cranes started coming overhead, and more and more and more, and then all of a sudden 2 white birds, which were the only two whooping cranes, landed a good half a mile down the field from me in the morning, and then they very slowly started feeding towards me. And as they got closer during the day, I had lunch, I had coffee, I'd film a little bit, and they kept coming and coming and coming and coming. And eventually I got them in head close up, a truly endangered species. And then someone came, or something happened, and I had the camera on, and they took off. And they all lifted, there was probably 200,000 cranes in the field and 2 white birds. And they all took off in slow motion, and I kept the camera on the whooping cranes. And the whole sequence and the whole day was definitely one of the most memorable for me as a wildlife cameraman.